Will you be the best brewer or baker? Find out with our review of Beer and Bread.
Beer and Bread is a two-player drafting, multi-card use game about making beer and bread. And I have some mixed feelings about the engine building component of the game.
I really enjoyed this game, but it has some flaws that keep it from being a top two-player game for me. We'll tell you all about it after this quick how to play. Beer and Bread is played over 6 rounds with alternate types of rounds, fruitful years and dry years.
During fruitful years, players will pick, play, and pass beer and bread cards back and forth.
Each card is multi-use and can be used to harvest resources, produce and sell, or upgrade and clean.
Players will harvest resources needed to produce beer and bread and then sell what they make.
They can also upgrade their farms to give themselves ongoing and endgame abilities.
During the dry years, players will play cards from their hands without passing, but there are 3 additional exchange cards that can be used.
After 6 rounds, players add up their scores for sold beer and bread separately. The product with the lower score is that player's score, and the player with the higher score wins. Before you go off making beer and bread, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button.
All your likes and subscribes really help our channel out, so thank you.
We've seen this game on social media for a long time now. It gets lots of high praise from everyone that plays it, so I was really excited to play it. Even though it's a 2-player game, I still like the idea of the multi-use cards and you're collecting resources, kind of set collection with what you're making and selling, and the idea that you're going after 2 different products, but the lower of those 2 scores is what you're going to score, also really intrigued me. So I was really excited to get this to the table, so I'm glad that we were able to pick up a copy. In the end, I feel like some of the mechanics just kind of felt repetitive. However, overall, I really enjoyed most of my experience with this game.
When we first set it up, just looking at the production value, I like the pieces, I like the artwork. It reminds me of a lot of different like towns or cities with like huts or, things like that, like harvesting. It like very nostalgic of a bunch of different games or just similar to those. So I was like, oh, okay, this looks a lot like this and this and this and this. So I do like this and this and this. So I wasn't turned off immediately or anything like that. Gameplay wise, I did like it. There were a lot of new things that I enjoyed and just overall had a lot of fun with the game.
So I'd have to say my favorite component are the beer and bread cards. You can see that they are beer and bread cards. They're stacked in the same stack and then they're dealt out. So sometimes you may get more beer cards, you may get more bread cards, you may get all of one or whatever, depending on how they're dealt out. In the fruitful years, it's a drafting. So you're going to draft back and forth between each player. So you'll see multiple cards. In the dry years, you'll only have your own hand, but you can also go after the exchange cards. But my favorite aspect about the cards is that they're multi-use. So if you look at the card, each card is structured the same, whether it's beer or bread. And then if you look at the card, the top is if you decide to harvest resources, those are the resources that you will get. And then if you look at the middle, these are the resources required to make this. So the other option you can do is then produce and sell. So you would produce this beer, you'd turn in these resources to make that beer, you'd flip it over. And then the last thing that you can also do is upgrade, which is at the bottom. So this gives you an upgrade, which gives you a permanent ongoing or endgame ability. You slide it under the board to keep track of which ability it is to remind yourself of when you're supposed to use that ability. And then when you do that, it's upgrade and clean. That means you sweep the cards away and whatever cards are at your bread station and your beer station, those will actually count at the end. So that's one more step that you have to think about as well, to think about, well, I can't just make it, I also have to sweep it so I can actually get those points. And then the points you get are up here. So there's 6 value cards, there's 7 value cards, 8 value cards, and 9 value cards. And I really like how there's 3 options of what you can do on the card while you're playing, because it really makes you go, well, I need these resources to build this or to produce this, but I have to play this card. But if I play it in a fruitful year, I'll get that card back and then I can build it in the dry year. So you can really think of that 2-step process of, okay, well, this is gonna give me what I need then, and I can then play it then. Or maybe I really like this upgrade, so did I play it there? So having 3 options for the card really makes your brain burn a little bit while you're staring at the card. It doesn't take a long time because there's only 6 rounds and you're only getting 5 cards each round, but you really are thinking, which of those 3 is the best option?
With that option to upgrade or just kind of engine build, I had mixed feelings just because I'm always a big fan of engine building because I'm like, okay, I'm going to start off, maybe I'll sacrifice collecting or doing this, maybe I'll just kind of build, and then later on I'm going to be able to do all this. I think this game kind of introduced a thought to me where it's like, oh, don't build it too great, because one of the rules or mechanics of the game is if you have too much resources, you have to offer it to your neighbor or the other player. And so I can like get all these resources, but at the end of the day, I could also end up helping him out. And it's like, oh, thank you. And so the other person can be like, nice engine you got there for us.
So that is something interesting to think about while you're producing your engine of like, well, Lee's got a great engine, but maybe I don't need that particular one. Maybe I could focus on these end game abilities instead and then use these other cards that have good engine building for their harvest value and then use them to then produce and sell. So it does make you think a lot, and you do have to pay attention to what the other player is doing with their cards as well.
Basically, in dry years or even fruitful years, if a certain resource runs out, then unless you have an ability that lets you pull from it, then it's gone. I don't think you and I ever really like ran into that when we played. It was just kind of the cards we had just worked out in a certain way that we got what we needed. So I felt like those abilities I didn't really need those or even care about like upgrading my engine or my farm with that.
Now, in the fruitful years, it's card drafting. So you have yours, you pick, you play, you pass to your opponent, and then they pick and play and pass, and you're gonna play them all. And the cards that you use to harvest, you gotta keep those cards, and then in the dry year, you're gonna fill back up to 5 based on how many. So if you harvest 5 cards, that's your hand for the next round. If you don't harvest any, you're gonna draw 5. But then there's also exchange cards. And I really like that aspect of the drafting. I'm not 100% sure I understand why the second round isn't drafting. I get that you can set yourself up for, okay, I'm gonna harvest this card and I know I'm gonna play it, and you wanna make sure that your opponent isn't gonna be able to take that card. However, I don't really see the advantage or disadvantage either way to not having it be drafting the entire time.
So not that I understood the exchange and why you didn't draft, but I did like it because it just kind of broke the, usually these drafting games like, okay, draw here, or pass this way, then pass counterclockwise. I like how this was kind of a switch from that. It's like, okay, draft. All right, next time it's like a indirect drafting, I guess. So I will say when it came to the drafting, I already mentioned it, I like how it got broken up. It wasn't just us drafting every round. It was like, here's the exchange. And so kind of like an indirect drafting.
I really like how the scoring works at the end, how you score your lowest product. So you can be producing a lot of beer or a lot of bread, but you're gonna be scoring the lower one. It keeps one player or both players from going after one product and just be, oh, I'm just gonna go beer heavy and make sure I score. So I think it does a good job of balancing when you take that lower score into effect. What did you not like about this game?
I guess the lesson it taught me about engine building and how maybe that can't be like your go-to move or thing for every game, because if you build up a great engine, you're building up a great engine for us. And if I want to win, I don't want to build up a great engine for us. I want it still for me.
The thing I didn't like about this is that it was strictly a 2-player game, which I understand 2-player games are popular. However, there's no reason why this couldn't be a higher player count. And I actually think it might be more fun because, as Lee was talking about, where you got to give the other player the resources, they can't exchange those resources out. They just have to have room. If they don't have room, then they have to reject it. However, if there's multiple players and in one round you got to pass your resources to the left and the next round you got to pass the resources to the right, it could really affect, as you're building that strong engine, it could affect who you're giving the resources to. So I think multiplayer would make this even better.
Overall, I had a lot of fun with the gameplay. I really liked the different components, and it even introduced a couple new things to me. Yeah, it's a 2-player game and we don't normally play a lot of them, but I did have a lot of fun with this, so I'm gonna give it an 8.
Overall, I really enjoyed this game. I like the mechanics of the multi-use cards. I like the low scoring at the end. I wish it wasn't just a 2-player game. However, that's not that big of a negative to me. I do like 2-player games. So overall, I'm gonna give it a 7. And that was our review of Beer and Bread.
What'd you think? Is this game gonna rise up in your collection? Let us know in the comments below.
And if you're enjoying our content, please like this video, subscribe to our channel.
Until next time, I'm Lee.
And I'm Kenny, and go party like a board gamer.